The conference room fell silent when Commander Jake Morrison walked in, and every diplomat from Earth looked at him with the same tired expression they always wore when dealing with the Zafrani Empire, and Jake knew immediately that this assignment would be different from anything he had handled before, because the holographic display showed a young woman with violet skin and silver hair, who sat with her arms crossed and her chin lifted in defiance. Ambassador Claire Watson cleared her throat and began explaining that Princess Lyra of House Zephyros had caused another diplomatic incident by refusing to attend the treaty signing ceremony and instead had taken a shuttle to explore the lower districts of the station without security, and this was the third time in 2 weeks that the princess had ignored protocol, and the Zafrani Emperor himself had requested that someone from Earth handle the situation because their own guards could not control her, and the Emperor believed that humans had a unique way of dealing with difficult situations. Jake felt his stomach tighten, because disciplining royalty from the most powerful empire in the galaxy was not exactly what he signed up for when he joined the diplomatic corps, but he nodded and accepted the assignment, because refusing would have meant insulting the Zafrani and potentially damaging the fragile peace treaty that had taken 5 years to negotiate. The princess quarters were located in the highest tower of the orbital station, and when Jake arrived, he found 2 Zafrani guards standing outside looking exhausted and defeated, and they stepped aside without a word as he approached the door, which slid open with a soft hiss. Princess Lyra stood by the window, overlooking the planet below, and she did not turn when Jake entered, but he could see her reflection in the glass, and her expression was one of boredom, mixed with curiosity about who had been sent to lecture her this time. Jake did not waste time with formal greetings because he had learned that directness worked better than ceremony when dealing with stubborn people, and he simply said that her behavior was unacceptable and that she needed to understand the consequences of her actions. The princess finally turned, and her eyes were a striking shade of amber that seemed to glow in the dim light, and she smiled, but it was not a friendly smile, and she asked him if he really thought he could tell her what to do when her family had ruled star systems for thousands of years while his species had barely left their own planet. Jake felt a flash of irritation, but he kept his voice calm and told her that he did not care about her title or her family history, because on this station, everyone followed the same rules, and her refusal to cooperate was putting the entire treaty at risk, and thousands of lives depended on the success of these negotiations. Lyra laughed, and it was a sharp sound that echoed in the large room, and she said that humans were always so serious about their rules and their treaties, and that maybe she did not want to be part of the agreement that would lock her people into centuries of boring diplomatic relations with species that could not even understand the concept of freedom. Jake realized then that this was not about rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but about something deeper, and he asked her what she meant by freedom, and for the first time, her expression softened just slightly. The princess walked away from the window and sat on the edge of a low couch, and she explained that her entire life had been planned from the moment she was born, and every decision was made by advisors, and every relationship was arranged for political gain, and coming to this station was supposed to be her moment to see other worlds and meet other species. But instead she was locked in meetings and ceremonies that felt exactly like the life she had left behind. Jake sat across from her, and he understood, more than she probably realized, because his own path had been chosen by family expectations and military duty, and he told her that he knew what it felt like to be trapped by responsibility. But running away would not solve anything, and would only make things worse for everyone, including herself. Lyra looked at him with those amber eyes and asked why he cared, and Jake admitted that he did not have a good answer, except that he had been ordered to make sure she behaved. But now that he had talked to her, he could see that she was not just a spoiled princess, but someone who was struggling with the weight of expectations. The princess seemed surprised by his honesty, and she asked him to tell her about Earth and about what it was like to live on a world where most people had never seen the stars up close, and Jake found himself talking about his childhood in the mountains and about how he used to look up at the night sky and dream of traveling to distant worlds, and how strange it was that now he spent most of his time in conference rooms instead of exploring. Lyra listened, and then she told him about her home world where the cities floated in the clouds and where the sunsets lasted for hours because of the way their planet rotated, and she described the festivals where millions of lights would fill the sky, and how she used to sneak away from the palace to watch the celebrations with the common people. They talked for hours, and Jake forgot that he was supposed to be disciplining her, and instead they shared stories about their lives and their frustrations, and somewhere during that conversation, Jake realized that despite their differences, they were not so different after all. When he finally left her quarters, the guards looked relieved, but also confused because they had expected shouting and conflict. But instead the princess had agreed to attend the next ceremony, and Jake had promised to show her the observation deck where she could see the stars, without diplomatic escorts. Over the following weeks, Jake found himself spending more time with Lyra than his orders required, and he told himself it was to make sure she stayed out of trouble. But the truth was that he enjoyed her company, and she made him laugh in a way he had not laughed in years. The princess attended her official duties, but Jake also took her to parts of the station that were off the diplomatic maps, and they visited the markets where traders from 100 worlds sold exotic goods, and they ate street food that made Lyra wrinkle her nose but then ask for more, and they watched ships arrive and depart from the lower docking bays. Lyra began to change, and she smiled more easily and stopped treating every event like a prison sentence, and the Zafrani delegation noticed, and they seemed pleased that the human advisor had succeeded where their own people had failed. But Jake knew that something else was happening, because when he was with Lyra, he felt a connection that went beyond friendship, and he caught himself thinking about her when he should have been focusing on his work. And he noticed the way her eyes lit up when she saw him, and the way she would touch his arm when she was excited about something. Problem was that falling for an alien princess was not just complicated, it was potentially catastrophic, because the Zafrani had strict rules about royal relationships, and humans were not exactly high on the list of acceptable partners for someone of her status. Jake tried to maintain distance, but it became harder when Lyra started seeking him out at odd hours and asking him to walk with her through the station gardens or to join her for late-night conversations about philosophy and the nature of duty one evening. They stood on the observation deck watching a nebula glow in the distance, and Lyra asked him if he ever regretted following orders and doing what was expected instead of what he wanted, and Jake knew she was not really asking about him. He told her that regret was part of life, but that did not mean they should ignore their responsibilities, and Lyra turned to look at him and said that maybe some things were worth taking risks for. Jake felt his heart race because he knew what she was implying, and he wanted to tell her that he felt the same way. But instead he reminded her that she had a duty to her people, and that their friendship, or whatever it was becoming, could not interfere with the treaty. Lyra stepped closer, and she told him that she was tired of being told what she could and could not feel, and that for the first time in her life she had met someone who saw her as more than just a title, and she was not going to pretend that did not matter. Before Jake could respond, the communication panel on his wrist buzzed with an urgent message from Ambassador Watson, requesting his immediate presence in the conference room, and Jake knew something had gone wrong. When he arrived, he found the entire diplomatic team in chaos because someone had leaked information about the princess and her human advisor spending time together, and the Zafrani court was demanding an explanation and threatening to withdraw from the treaty negotiations. Ambassador Watson looked at Jake with disappointment and anger, and she asked him if he had forgotten his mission and allowed personal feelings to compromise everything they had worked for. Jake wanted to defend himself, but he knew she was right, and he had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and now the consequences were spreading beyond just him and Lyra. The Emperor himself sent a message demanding that Jake be removed from the station immediately, and that the princess return to the Zafrani delegation quarters until the negotiations were complete, and there was no room for argument. Jake went to say goodbye to Lyra, and he found her in her quarters, looking out at the stars again, and when she turned, she had tears in her eyes, which he had never seen before, and she told him that she had tried to convince her father to let him stay, but the Emperor would not listen. Jake told her that none of this was her fault, and that